Okay. All right. And I will just run through this top to bottom one last time and we'll jump right in. So again, for those of you who are just joining, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Greetings. My name is Jasmine Brower. I'm the certification specialist with the Women's Business Development Center. I'm out of the satellite office in Minneapolis, Minnesota. So I'm really excited and grateful to have you all here today. A couple quick housekeeping things. Last time I'll go through this. This is being recorded as a webinar. Because it is a webinar, you don't have speaking capabilities unless you are the panelist, being myself. So all questions, you'll need to use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. You don't have to wait until the end of the presentation. Go ahead and ask them as you have questions that arise. I will do my best to respond as I see fit. However, I do think a lot of these can be answered throughout the progression of the content. So if I don't have a direct answer for you right away, it's because I anticipate addressing it as we progress into the webinar itself. But otherwise, write down all of your questions as well, and I will do my best to answer to any outstanding questions at the end. And then final reminder, we do have a follow-up email being sent out to all of those who are registered for today's webinar that will include a handout of the PowerPoint slides and then a couple helpful documents with links and tips for today. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll and we can get started. Okay, so just a little bit about you guys before we jump in. So it looks like majority did hear about this from the WBDC website, which is awesome. We love to know that that is getting the message out and the reach to have our participants join. It looks like majority of us are looking for access to contracts and hoping to expand some professional and business networks. We'll get into the benefit of these certifications as well. And then it looks like an overwhelming majority are not currently certified, which is likely what brought you to today's presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Okay, and we will go ahead and jump right into it. Okay, so what we will talk about is we've got a lot of content to cover in a short amount of time. So we will discuss the history of WeBank, the types of certification, and if certification is a good fit for you and your business, the purpose and the benefits of these certifications, and then how you essentially obtain the WeBank certification. So as a reminder, don't be overwhelmed. You will get a handout of these PowerPoint slides with the pertinent notes, hyperlinks, and the list of required documents, and a link to this recording. So if there's details that you want to go back and listen to, you will have that. All right, so what we're going to start off with is the Small Business Administration. This was established in 1953, and it's an independent agency of the federal government that their purpose is to aid, counsel, assist, and protect the interests of small business concerns. So they essentially preserve the free competition enterprise, and they maintain and they do strengthen the overall economy of our nation. So after World War II, the federal government did recognize that small businesses were not gaining equal access to federal contracts. And the SBA was established through the Small Business Act as of July 30th of 1953. So that being their mission statement, essentially saw that they needed to level the playing field for those small businesses. Right. The executive orders, so prescribing arrangements for developing and coordinating a national program for minority business enterprise was enacted, Executive Order 11458. And then the second executive order was creating a national women's business enterprise policy and prescribing arrangements in order to develop, implement, and coordinate a national program for women's business enterprises. So March 5th, back in 1969, due to a lot of civil unrest and demonstrations of the 1960s across the United States, Nixon actually signed into place Executive Order 11458. So in order to establish a federal agency that was dedicated exclusively to minority business enterprises, Nixon did recognize the impact of minority businesses on the nation's economy as a whole. And then at this time, it was mandated that government agencies and contractors were to use minority-owned businesses on federal contracts. And then because of this, he additionally established the Minority Business Development Agency, or the MBDA, under the U.S. Department of Commerce. So today, the MBDA does promote growth and competitiveness of United States minority-owned businesses. This does include Hispanic and Latino Americans, Asian Pacific Americans, African Americans, and Native Americans. So very all-inclusive. And then going back to the second executive order, so this federal government executive order required that federal government agencies were to take affirmative action in the support of women business enterprises, be it in management, technical, financial, and procurement assistance, business-related education, counseling, training, and information dissemination to support those women-owned businesses. Right. And then some small business statistics by numbers. So small business stats and their impact on the economy. So small businesses do drive about 44% of the US economic activity, and that's based on a survey from the Small Business Administration's Office of Advocacy from 2019. And what we didn't know previously is that according to the SBA Office of Advocacy, in 2019, the small business profile stated that 30.7 million small businesses were employing almost 60 million people in 2019, which is pretty impressive. Small businesses being defined as firms that employ less than 500 employees. And then small businesses do continue to fuel the economy. They do represent almost 42% of all businesses, which if you break it down is close to 13 million, employing 9.4 million workers, and they do generate revenues of just shy of $2 trillion. And that's according to the annual State of Women-Owned Business report that was actually commissioned by the American Express. Right? And then minority-owned businesses as well. So according to the Small Business Office of Advocacy, minority business ownership, and this is data coming from 2012, they have about 8 million minority-owned businesses that contribute about 1.3 trillion in revenue and 7.2 million jobs to the economy, which again, small businesses, big impact. Super exciting to see these statistics continue to increase and their overall impact on the economy and what they do. So my apologies, I skipped ahead a little bit. All right, so we're going to jump into supplier diversity, kind of touching on the what, who, why, and how. So starting with the what, essentially what supplier diversity is a business program that proactively encourages the use of historically underutilized businesses, being women, veterans, service-disabled veterans, minorities, LGBTQ, disadvantaged, and disability-owned businesses, by providing small business owners with access to corporate buyers, and it essentially helps even the playing field for those suppliers. The who involved is going to be the public sectors, so local, state, and federal government, and the private sectors, both companies and corporations. Right. As far as why corporations and public and private sectors elect to participate, it is the right thing for business. This does increase the local job creation and economic development. It helps engage those in the community and enhance community engagement, and it does increase the corporation's profits. The revenue is actually increased through affinity buying, so women support corporations that support women-owned businesses. It does help drive competition amongst those vendors, and it does increase and promote innovation as well. Additionally, because we have a consumer day and age where public image does matter quite a bit, it helps affiliate a positive corporate image, federal or customer requirements, and attach that accountability when you do have supplier diversity coming into play to make sure that those that are previously underserved are getting access to these larger government entities and public and private sectors. And then how are they doing this? So essentially every supplier diversity sector within a company determines their program goals for the year. And these goals are calculated either based on a percentage of the amount spent or a dollar amount based on the total amount of money that a company plans to offer out to a bid. Basically, how much they're willing to offer out to bid on a job. And then corporations want to meet their goals, so they are excited and motivated to look to do business with you. So that pool of money in terms of what they would potentially and prospectively bid out for jobs, they're incentivized to work with minority-owned businesses to help them meet these goals. And being diverse, working within the supplier diversity realm helps them do so. Right. So we're going to jump into WeBank. So a little bit about WeBank, which is the governing entity for WBDC. So WeBank, as you see the logo to the left, was founded in 1997 with its headquarters being still in Washington, D.C. There are over 16,000 women business enterprises certified nationwide. And WeBank is the largest national third-party certifier for the United States. And that includes for the Small Business Administration and the Women-Owned Small Business Federal Contracting Program. There are 14 regional partner organizations, or RPOs, as you'll frequently hear us refer to, that certify, offer resources and programming, and essentially aid women-owned businesses and help them flourish and thrive in the ecosystem. So the WBDC, or Women's Business Development Center, being one of those 14 RPOs as an example. And their mission as a whole is to fuel economic growth globally by identifying, certifying, and facilitating the development of women-owned businesses. So certification is accepted by more than 1,000 corporations, in addition to many states, cities, and other governing entities. Right, a little bit of a breakdown of the regions that WeBank works with. So WeBank is national, regardless of where you get certified. So this is just a color-coded breakdown of what each RPO certifies by state. So WeBank does deliver their certification through partnerships with those 14 regional partner organizations, the Women's Business Development Center being one of those 14. Here we are in this pink maroon color. So the WBDC is the largest of these 14 regional partner organizations, and we certify in 9 states across the Midwest. So that's Missouri, Illinois, got Kansas, Minnesota, North and South Dakota, Nebraska, and Wisconsin. And then within this 9-state region, we currently have over 2,100 certified WBEs in these 9 states, with over 90 corporate partners that we collaborate with as well. Right, and then jumping into who we are as the Women's Business Development Center. So we were founded in 1986 with our headquarters in Chicago, Illinois, with our mission to be supporting and accelerating business development and growth, targeting women and serving all diverse business owners in order to strengthen their participation in and the impact on the economy. So as I previously mentioned, we do cover a 9-state region with 8 other Midwestern states in addition to Illinois that were previously mentioned. We do have satellite offices outside of Illinois, Minneapolis being one of those locations. Additionally, we do have satellite offices in Milwaukee, Kansas City, and St. Louis. So these offices provide certification and procurement activities, in addition to some capacity building and educational opportunities that are often in partnership with existing small business ecosystems. And that's where our local and regional corporate partners come into play as well. All right. So there was a question about the types of certification. So there are 3 high-level categorizations that we like to break these into. So we have national certifications, which is where WeBank falls with the WBE. We have state certifications that, again, are unique by state, and then local and municipal certifications that can be broken down particularly by each city. So we have MBEs and WBEs, ESBEs, all of these acronyms that can be categorized within the local and municipal breakdowns. It is important to remember that none of these necessarily supersede the other because it's not a one-size-fits-all. Ultimately, who you're trying to conduct business with, your clients and customer base, dictates what certifications are important to them. So the main things to consider when looking at the difference in WeBank certification in comparison to other certifying entities, being at the state level or the local and municipal levels, is that you want to keep in mind who your target audience is, who are you doing business with outside of your home state, the cost that's associated with these applications or certifications. Most others are free to apply, but some are not. You may have to pay an annual certification fee. Some of those may not be refundable. Another thing to consider is going to be those additional services that they provide. Are there professional development opportunities? Are there capacity building opportunities? Procurement and engagement, procurement opportunities being our matchmaking events that we host either regionally or nationally with our corporate partners by industry to get together some of those WBEs to see if they are able to pitch and get in front of these corporations to see if there's opportunities to work with them. Okay, and I do have a question up here saying, if I certify at the state level, do I have to do so with the city as well? So that would be a good thing to look into at a state level because each requirement is different. The state of Illinois versus the state of Minnesota each have different requirements. It's likely that you are not mandated, but I would recommend looking specifically at the certifications state-wise that you're looking to apply for, and then see if there's any that are contingent on local certifications as well. Okay, and then the WBDC does have memorandums of understanding with a couple cities, one being the city of Chicago, the Business Enterprise Program, and the state of Missouri's Office of Equal Opportunity, that do allow you to participate in kind of an accelerated version of their certification programs. What it typically does entail is that you may not have to complete the entirety of the application. It would be an abbreviated version. You might not have to have a site visit done of the business. So it's kind of an abridged version of that. But what we do want to remind you of is that it is possible to be certified at one entity and not be certified at another, because these guidelines and criteria are not going to be identical across the board. Right, I have another question here saying you were just approved for the MWBE through the state of Illinois. Is this a national certification as well? So that, because you were certified through the state, would strictly be a state certification. That's not going to be a national certification. The national certifications, some of these that are listed that I have would be WeBank, the NMSDC, and then the NAVOBA. So that's going to be unique to each state. If you're looking at national certifications, you'll want to start there and then kind of segment down. But again, depends on the type of business you're looking to do and what that client base looks like. Okay, I have another question from Rosa. I work in both Wisconsin and Illinois. Should I apply on local levels, county and state, as well as national certification? So again, this is going to come down to what type of business and services you're looking to provide. A lot of our applicants like to start with, again, large scope national certification. And then if there are more specific local entities that you are looking to have included, so government contracts specifically are going to be more local and state-based, that would be a good place to start as well. All right, so then how to know if you should certify your business. So a couple questions that we always like to start with is considering if your products or services are targeted at corporations, mass retail, and or government agencies. So it's important to know who your product or services are directed at, know your target audience, or if you have a product or service that can provide a solution or solve a pain point to those audiences. Second point to consider is, do you have capacity to deliver the quality of products or services on large contracts? So if an opportunity presents itself, do you have a network of these contractors and or other small businesses that you could leverage in order to make do on these potential contract opportunities? Do you have the capacity to deliver these quality products and the scope of services that might be requested on these large contracts? All right, the third one being, if you are looking to apply for these certifications or businesses, are you willing to share the details of your business? So specifically for the WBE, this can include things like business and or personal federal tax returns, capital investment records, your bylaws, your operating agreements, your governing documents, trusts, power of attorney, so on and so forth. And then finally, we want to make sure that you are clear that certification does not guarantee or entitle your company to receive any business and or contracts. So ultimately, contracts don't start falling from the sky. Your return on investment and opportunities are earned and not simply given due to the status as a WBE. Do remember, though, that corporations and government entities and other prospects are looking for vendors who can solve for and anticipate their needs and meet and or exceed their expectations. So something that I always like to recommend is considering your value proposition, being what can you offer that differentiates you from the rest of your competition, and what capabilities do you have to ensure that you can meet and exceed and or exceed the expectations of what is asked of you should an opportunity present itself. All right, I have a question right now. A janitorial business service is what someone has. Which certification is good for your business? So again, that's going to depend on how extensively you're marketing these services. Are you looking to, expand these services outside of the state? Are these local opportunities? That, again, not so much of a black and white question, is unique to who you're trying to conduct business with. My guess is if this is a local service, you'd likely want to start with the state and local municipal opportunities first and foremost. And then if those expand and you've exceeded what you're looking for with those, then I would look at expanding into kind of the national certification. So if it is local services, then yes, you would be looking at the local and municipal opportunities, if not potentially state opportunities. Okay, so the benefits of certification that we'll start with. So ultimately, golden rule to remember is that certification will not solely get or guarantee you any business. It is a marketing tool that we help you to use to differentiate your business. It's ultimately a tactic to help you in a larger strategy of other sales and marketing activities. So you have to be able to communicate how your products and or services create those solutions, solve problems, or can meet your clients' pain points, as we discussed. So again, know your value, know how to strategically craft your value proposition and pitch your business. And then there are differences in benefits for federal contracts and third-party certifications. It is important to remember that they do differ. Okay, and I've got, yes, Evelyn, you're welcome. Okay, so federal contracting benefits. What these are is small business set-asides. These are more so prime contracts for small business. These are no bid contracts. So prime and subcontracts for women-owned businesses. So it gives you the ability to bid on small business set-aside solicitations. About 23% of prime contracts are for small businesses, and it essentially provides you an opportunity for no bid contracts that are valued at under $25,000. And then these links, again, will be included in the handout. So visiting the SBA page with federal contracting and then AppTac as well. Okay, I have another question. This is a union signatory commercial contractor based in Illinois. They're less than 10 miles from the Wisconsin border and over 90% of the work is performed in Wisconsin. I would recommend that if most of the business is executed in Wisconsin, that I would start with that state. And then because they overlap, it wouldn't hurt you to look into Illinois and Wisconsin certifications. All right, and then I have an anonymous question as far as explaining what a non-bid contract is. So because you're a small business, this would ultimately require no bidding in terms of fulfilling an RFP or a request for a proposal. It's basically just given small business, it's given to small businesses as the priority to see who can fulfill these contracts, but they are valued at less than $25,000. So it's basically a non-competing section within those small business administrations, but there's jobs that are posted that need fulfillment, and they are given priority first and foremost to those small businesses. Okay, what is the difference between BEP and WBE? So as far as BEP, that is an acronym that maybe I have misspoken. Not familiar with BEP, but WBE being Women Business Enterprise. Okay. All right, so third-party certification and benefits. Now we're going on to access and visibility. All right, so with access and visibility, you can leverage your relationship with the Women's Business Development Center in order to meet our corporate partners. Again, these are local corporate partners all the way up to national corporate partners. Once you're certified within WeBank, you're now listed in a national database with the possibility of other WBEs and corporate members across the United States that can find your business contact information within WeBank link. So once you are certified and accepted into that network, that automatically makes you viable to be searched in that national database. This ultimately will give you access to corporate and government contact opportunities as well as our corporate partners, who sometimes will ask us to pull lists of potential WBEs within certain industries for them to use. And then we do offer or encourage participation in local, regional, and national matchmaking events that are often done by industry. So if we have corporate partners across all three of those channels, we recommend that WBEs do register in that matchmaking event just to have the exposure to those corporations if it is a good fit by industry and is something that you feel you could compete in. So another access and visibility point being the branding. So the women-owned WeBank logo is very prominent, as you can see on the screen. So The use of the WeBank logo and or listing of your business on the women-owned logo website is part of the benefit to being within our WBE network. We do have several of our WBEs that utilize this branding in their marketing collateral. Again, the logo being very prominent, it does bring consumer recognition to women-owned businesses that are certified via WeBank with consumer-facing products. So a question I always like to pose is, what product or goods have you seen in stores that you didn't know previously were women-owned? So again, in today's world, because consumers are highly aware and cognizant of their purchasing choices, a lot do elect to support minority-owned, women-owned, or local brands. So this logo does aid in the recognition to consumers that you are purchasing a product from a verified women-owned business, which is super cool. So I challenge you, next time you run out to the store, if you are between two products, just doing a quick turnaround, you'd be surprised how many you can see in the supermarkets or just in your local kind of retail stores. All right, and again, opportunities to present, sponsor, nominate, or be nominated at high visibility regional and national events. All right, and then how long does the company have to be open? Okay, so we will get to this as well later into the presentation. There's a question about degree of difficulty to get certified, and that, again, I can't provide a concrete answer to. Degree of difficulty, I think, is based on eligibility first and foremost, making sure that you're thorough in understanding what you have to meet for expectations to be eligible for applying for certifications. And I always advise with applicants too, the process isn't difficult as much as it is tedious, but if you're willing to do kind of the groundwork and have everything prepared ahead of time without any additional steps or kind of backtracking, that will expedite the process and make it go much, much smoother. Okay, and then third-party certification benefits from a resource and capacity building standpoint. So local, regional, and national programming and events are often part of our capacity building bubble or umbrella of opportunities. So we do extend invitations to practices for workshops, webinars, conferences. Some of these might be our spring summit. We have a Chicago conference, the WeBank National Conference and Business Fair. We have executed pitch competitions where participants can register in terms of how to perfect their pitching capabilities, delivering pitches to corporate partners, etc. Our current pitch competition, which is actually wrapping up right now, those who advanced, I want to say top 10, actually had the opportunity to work with a corporate partner to hone in their pitch and get some kind of executive coaching to improve upon. So that was really exciting for them. And then WeBank education and grants for leadership and development programs. So that is going to be more industry specific and depending on the sector of businesses that might apply to, but there are on occasion some education and grants available for leadership development programs. Okay, and I have a question about document requirements. So in short, no, documents across the board for all certifications will not necessarily be identical. They may be similar, but what I will advise is starting either separate folders or tabs on a desktop physically with a checklist of every ask needed for each certification. As you compile those, you'll want to compile those first before you start the application process. And it may be possible that if you have to print or save a copy of a document that they do overlap, that you can save those later and put those in the required folders. So it's likely that some may overlap, but they will not necessarily be identical across the board. Okay, so if you apply within the WBE, so the WBE, it is stating that nationally it's recognized by those corporations that accept the WBE certification. However, it doesn't include those city or state opportunities as well that may be exclusive to those contracts. So that is with the network of those businesses that recognize the WBE certification. It's not all inclusive of city or state opportunities. Okay, and then advocacy being our largest umbrella. So the community of support amongst WBE certified companies being, I would say, one of the largest benefits that We do have our WBE Speak To. They really enjoy having the support network being there for them. It does allow them to connect with other like-minded women-owned businesses and just women in general to learn and grow from each other, in addition to the development and education opportunities that we do provide to them. So one of these organizations being the Women Impacting Public Policy, or WIP. It's a national nonpartisan organization that advocates on behalf of women entrepreneurs. Their goal is to strengthen their impact on our nation's public policy, create economic opportunities, and help forge alliances with other business organizations. Right. And then as far as steps to how to get WeBank certified, so kind of the meat and potatoes of this presentation. So to start, the entire application process for WBE certification through WeBank is online. You submit your application online, and any questions about your application will be online via WeBank link. There is an annual non-refundable application fee on a sliding scale that's based on your business's revenues from your most recent federal taxes. So there is a chart breakdown that will be included on your handouts following up. So starting application fees are $350, and that's for companies that gross revenues under $1 million, all the way up to companies that gross above 50 million, being $1,250 for their application fee. This fee is annual, and it would be paid every year you reapply after being granted the certification. So say you apply, you go through the process of being a new applicant, you're granted that certification. It's 1 year from the date you applied. If you continue to reapply to maintain that certification, the same fees will apply. It is important to note, though, if for any reason the revenues do fluctuate, we go off of the most recent federal taxes. So say your business started at, $1,250, you've exceeded 50 million in revenue, and you had that fee of over $1,000. And for some reason, in the last year, especially with 2020, your revenues dropped to under $1 million. Then that fee is, again, sliding scale based on the revenues. But again, those have to be confirmed and verified through federal taxes. The timeline for this is about 2 to 3 months, so 30 to 90 days. And that's after you receive an email stating that we have received your documents and that your application is ready to be reviewed by a committee. So collectively, anywhere from 30 to 120 days total. I do have a question. If you are a new entity without tax returns, are you still eligible for certification? So yes, that is absolutely something you are still eligible for. In lieu of federal taxes from the business, we would require, instead of 3 years business taxes, we take 3 years of personal income taxes. So again, making sure that you're comfortable sharing that with us, because that is kind of a mandated requirement if you don't have those federal tax returns for your business. Okay, and then for application review, is there a COVID consideration for those industries hard hit? Okay, so application review. They'd been in business for a couple of decades and were previously certified, but their whole industry is shut down. I'm not entirely sure how to go forward with answering this question as far as COVID consideration. Are you meaning if you are still eligible to apply, if the fee is waived? There are sometimes scholarship opportunities that are eligible or available through corporations or corporate partners, but again, that's on a case-by-case basis. Currently, we don't have any type of exemption due to those industries that have been hit. That being said, that could change with the current landscape being the way it is as far as what it entails. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so it looks like there's a couple questions that are coming in. Do you have to be a WeBank member to participate in the pitch? And who could you speak with if you don't understand what's being said? So the pitch competitions, yes, are exclusive to our certified WBEs. That's one of the benefits, is invitations to participate in those contests. And it looks like speaking with someone if you don't understand what's being said. So if you could hold on to this question until the very end, I think we can jump into that in more detail to make sure I can get you the appropriate resources and what is being asked to clarify. Okay, and so the income of the business, ultimately that's still going to dictate the application fee based on where you sit for revenues. Still part of the process. Do keep in mind that those application fees are non-refundable. So again, I would check the WBDC website. Sometimes there are scholarship opportunities in case a corporation is willing to waive the fees, but it doesn't matter if there's been a drastic decrease in revenue to be eligible. It would just impact the fee owed for the renewal or first time application. Okay. Okay, so I do see a couple bubbles in the chat. It looks like you guys are talking amongst yourselves, which is fantastic. Always appreciate when you are able to use each other as resources, but if there are questions unanswered, hold on to those and we will get to them at the very end as well. I just wanna get through kind of the bulk of being WeBank certified, and I think that will resolve some kind of outstanding broad questions, and then we can go from there. So as far as the timeline, like I said, you're looking collectively at 30 to 120 days total. Okay, and then eligibility. So this is about a 10-step process that you can see. Again, this link will be included in your handouts. There are minimum criteria used to determine your eligibility. So that's looking at ownership, contribution, operation and control, independence, and then citizenship and being a permanent legal resident. So first and foremost, you do have to be fully formed and operational. Not-for-profits are not eligible. So there's a couple business structures that you can have to be eligible. So you can be a sole proprietor, an LLC, you can be in a partnership or in a corporation. And then these 5 criteria that I discussed that you must meet in order to apply. So ownership, 51% or more women owned by a sole woman or women that must be 18 years of age or older. Your contribution is going to be proof of contribution of capital and or expertise in terms of how you have the knowledge or capital investment needed to operate the business. Third is going to be operation and control. So proof of management of the business as far as your operating position, your bylaws, your hiring and firing instruction, and other decision-making roles and capabilities. The fourth is going to be independence. So providing evidence that the female owner or owners do have the ability to perform in the area of specialty or that industry, or that your expertise stands alone without the reliance of either the finances or resources of a non-female owned firm or male. So we do often have males that are involved in the business that may acquire some ownership. That independence piece is making sure that independently from those male contributors or owners, that you do stand alone with the knowledge, expertise in the industry and specialty areas, to not be reliant on those male contributors, either financially or in their expertise to kind of operate the business. And then the fifth criteria being you must be a US citizen and or US permanent legal resident. Okay, so what is an example of proof of management of the business? So operation and control, that will ultimately get down to a checklist within the application. So a high level checklist is asked of what the female's authority entails. So that can be anything from hiring and firing to signing to overseeing the operations. And then ultimately what we're looking at are those governing documents as well. So who within the company has the authority to do what and execute, and then those bylaws, structures, or LLC operating agreements as far as board of directors, so on and so forth, with who has the authority to do what. Okay. And then, so as far as expenses that a spouse pays for, all of that will want to be documented. One sole incident can't really stand alone as criteria to be evaluated, but we do want to know in terms of contribution to the business. This is not explicit for kind of personal use. This would be a business application in terms of whether or not the female would have the capability to function without that contribution by the spouse. Okay, and then you have a couple necessary documents that we'll look at. So there is a WeBank documentation required web page that will be included in your links after this webinar. So a couple of the necessary documents will cover kind of general information in addition to owner eligibility, financial structure, your personnel, your management and governance information, and then any additional documents. So there is a pretty extensive list of required documents that's going to be broken down based on your business structure. There are some documents that are going to be consistent across the board, regardless of your business structure. So keep that in mind. If it is listed, rule of thumb, then it is necessary. All documents in the mandatory section must be completed and submitted by all applicants. So if you don't have it, or for example, say it's a W-2 for every owner, director, officer from the previous year that you received compensation, then if and only if you don't have this, you must draft a letter on company letterhead stating why the document is not in existence. It has to be signed, dated, and uploaded in place of that mandatory document. So you can't just elect not to upload something just because. It needs to be proven that you don't have that document and stated by the owner, signed and dated as well. Required documents are a little bit different. So required documents, as a general rule of thumb, if you have the documentation that's listed under this section, then you should submit it as part of your application. If not, then you're going to go ahead and select non-applicable. Excuse me. This is going to be for documents like operating agreements or bylaws. These requirements can be different based on the state in which you registered the business. But if that is something that you do have, say from inception to now, you've had bylaws that were drafted when the company started, have since made changes, all of those versions do need to be included in your application. And then some other examples of these documents will be general information. So we'll ask for a business history, resumes of the female owners, licenses, owner eligibility. So we're looking for that birth certificate or passport. The financial structure is going to be the financial statements. So 3 years of those federal taxes. If this is a new business, then we'll require those 3 years of personal income taxes, any loans, and then proof of your capital investment. So personnel going into that is going to be the roles of employees, a list of them, their length of service, management information being any agreements for service, subsidiaries or consulting agreements if you work with any consultants. The governance information will vary the most based on your business structure. So that can be anything such as assumed names documents for sole proprietors. If there's any partnership certificates, if you have a partnership in existence, it's going to be articles of incorporation for corporations or LLCs. You're going to have bylaws, potentially meeting minutes, operating agreements, member lists. And then note that there are going to be additional requirements for a separate certification, being the Woman-Owned Small Business Certification, or WOSB, but we will discuss this in later detail. Right, and then after the documents, so once you have all of this compiled, you're going to get an email confirmation. Once you complete your application, make sure you click submit after you complete it. Had a couple instances where it's not saved. We would hate for you to lose that information, so make sure you save it, make sure that you click submit. Once you've hit submit, you receive a confirmation email that it was submitted. Note that with the fees, paying by credit card does speed up the application processing time. If you pay by check, we can't start to process the application until we receive your check at headquarters in Chicago. So oftentimes if there's any inconsistencies or if the revenue doesn't match with the application, sometimes we've had applicants that owe a little bit more based on that income for the most recent tax year. We often give them a call or send them an email saying, hey, we apologize, there is a discrepancy in the income based on the most frequent year. If you could please contact our headquarters office, we can go ahead and take care of that over the phone with a credit card. Secure payment, you'll receive receipt of payment. Easiest way to make sure that we can continue processing that. Otherwise, until we receive that check in the physical office space, we are unable to start processing it. The next step is going to be document intake. So your file is then assigned to a certification officer like myself, where we review all of the documents that you've uploaded and submitted to ensure, one, that the documentation is there and that essentially the story is complete for the certification committee. So everything between those mandatory document lists and the required document lists, If you have it, it needs to be uploaded. If you don't have it, there needs to be that documentation from the owner signed and dated on that letterhead stating why it is not present. You might also be asked to provide additional details. So there is a Q&A function on your dashboard within the WeBank link system. Emails might go into your spam folder if we try to contact you that way. The Q&A function within WeBank link is encrypted. So that's the safest way for us to request additional information or ask questions. And you can also submit documentation through that portal. Email is an efficient way to get a hold of us in case you have a generic question, but please note that if you do reach out via email, any responses may be rerouted based on your email filters. So be sure to check your trash and spam folders often. The next process is the review process itself. So we have a certification committee meeting every month. Pre-pandemic, the meetings were rotating in all of our major markets in person, but we currently are executing those virtually. So all committee meetings and committee members are confidential, and they're a mix of our certified WBEs, some corporate partners, and then we do have some community partners as well that comprise that committee. Oh, right. Looks like I have a question. So currently there's not, that unfortunately is something that is not accessible unless you are certified within WeBank to view those lists. That is confidential. My best recommendation would be to, let's see, to view a directory. Okay, yep, so that would be kind of unique to those industries. My recommendation would actually be to contact other businesses with similar services that are offered and see if there's additional kind of certifications that they obtain, or looking at the scope of who she's trying to reach and see if there's certain certifications that they require to extend those certifications or those services outside of kind of state lines, if there's anything national, because we are unable to provide that kind of queue or list of those that are certified within the contracts they've obtained, because those can ebb and flow, and you have to either be staff or a certified member to share any of that period information. Okay. Does it matter if the owner, i.e. myself being 100% owner, is not yet on my payroll? So this is a great example of what might not be included. So we have oftentimes a lot of business owners that might be 100% owned. If they're not on the payroll, what they'll do is upload a document stating if they might not take a salary. They may say, hi, I'm not on the payroll. I elect to take owner's draws, or I do not pay myself. I don't take any owner's draws. I just recycle everything back into the business. As long as we can account for what you would be doing with that income and it's signed and dated by yourself as the owner, then that's fine if you're not yet on the payroll. We just want to understand where those funds are being cycled back. All right, and then the next step in the process would be a site visit. So after the review process from the committee, all of our new applicants are required to have a site visit as part of their application process. Site visits were formally held at the headquarters location, physically in person, which could be your home. So note that you're not required to give us a tour of your house. Currently, with the global pandemic still in occurrence, we are holding our site visits virtually via Zoom. So the majority of female owners, so anyone that constitutes 51%, must be present and participate in the site visit. So sometimes it's just one female that comprises 51, maybe it's 3 women across the business that comprise 51%. Everyone who comprises that 51% needs to be present on that site visit call. And then from there, once that site visit is executed, a final decision is issued. So you'll receive an email in WeBank link that will notify you of the final decision, either if it was approved or denied. That will be a letter. In the event that you are denied, the letter does provide specific details and reasons. That way you're not left blindly just with a denial. You at least have some directionality in terms of what needs to be corrected or amended. From there, you do have 30 days from the denial date to appeal the decision. Appeals can be held at a local level, and then if they are upheld and confirm what the first recommendation was, then an applicant does have the opportunity to appeal, request to appeal at the national level as well. So there are 2 steps to that. If you don't appeal, you can reapply, but you have to wait 6 months from the date of the denial letter. And that's after you have corrected the reasons for denial. So that letter that you receive, if for any reason you are denied, is treated kind of for guidance to make sure that you cross-check everything that you were denied for. We would hate to see you come back and apply, not check all of the reasons as to why you were issued a denial, and not be able to have that certification first and foremost, have it denied again, and then know that that fee every time you do apply is non-refundable. All right, so I have a couple questions. So when you submit the documentation, who reviews the information and how is that information kept confidential? So all of your documents, because this process is online, WeBank link is encrypted. The only staff who have access to this are the certification officers like myself. So the only people who have access to this have the credentials within WBDC to review that. And the same goes for our committee members. We don't show them the extent of what we see. There's bits and pieces that we review, then share with them, but they do undergo the same training and have a confidentiality agreement that they sign as well. So if there's any governing documents that need to be reviewed to make sure they evaluate and hit criteria, they are privy to that information, but because they sign that confidentiality agreement, that's kept secure and safe. Okay, and then when in the process of creating the documents and you have questions, can you give us the best way of getting our questions answered? So a little vague in terms of directionality, but typically, if you're uncertain about how to proceed with something, the best way is to reach out to us with that Q&A function. Oftentimes, if people are unsure about what to upload, they might just elect not to or select that it is not applicable. Typically, if it is, what you'll see when we do the intake of the documents, we go ahead and we'll hit that we didn't receive it and then reach out to you in the Q&A function saying, hey, this is part of the documents that we should be seeing. Here's some clarification. If you have further questions, let me know, and then we'll submit that through the Q&A. So that's how our communication will be logged so that we can see what we asked for, and then it's a secure portal where you could submit what we request. All right. Is there a general certification fee for WeBank certification? If so, can you share the certification application cost? So there is not a general certification fee. Again, that's based on your annual revenue, which can change every year. So sometimes that fee might be X amount one year. It is low end revenues under $1 million are $350. High end, all companies that exceed 50 million in revenue, that application amount is $1,250. Okay, see here. So we are going to touch base high level on WOSB Certification Basics, or the Women-Owned Small Business Certification. So this here is where you can no longer self-certify. The certification has to be used by federal government, and you can complete this in conjunction with the WBE application, but you can't do this as a standalone. So if you elect to apply for WOSB, it has to be done at the same time. But to be eligible for WOSB, you have to be approved as a WBE first. So that being said, you can't self-certify. You have to certify via the Small Business Administration or one of their third-party certifying entities, being us. So the Women-Owned Small Business, it's a federal government certification that's used as part of the SBA's federal contracting program. So this provides greater access to federal government contracting opportunities. So you can still participate as a self-designated woman-owned business, but you aren't eligible for certain set-aside programs. So if you are registered in the Small Business Administration system as a woman-owned small business, it then allows you to bid on prime contracts that are set aside for specific industries where these women-owned small businesses are substantially underrepresented. So depending on the industry, some might not be applicable depending on what you do. A lot of our applicants might say, you know, that's not really applicable to us. We don't work with a lot of government contracts. Other applicants, based on the industry, maybe that's all you predominantly focus on, in which case that's a great way to apply for this and go forward. Right. And then note that the guidelines will be separate from WeBank and what you needed for WBE. So there are additional guidelines that you have to meet in order to qualify, in addition to being WBE certified. So because it's small business related, this is done based on your NAICS codes and how you identify your business. This is a chart that is annually printed off where each NAICS code listed on your taxes and in your application. Those have to meet either revenue size standards or an employee size. So if they exceed either of those, then that makes you ineligible, excuse me. And then if you are interested in selling to the federal government, you want to select to apply for WOSB at the same time. Again, so if you do elect to apply for WOSB, note that you have to do that at the same time for your WBE. You cannot go back and apply later. You will have to wait for the following year. So say you're renewing, you decided that the WOSB wasn't for you this time around, you can't unfortunately go back 2 weeks later and want to apply. Your next window of eligibility will be the following year during your renewal. See. All right, I got a couple questions here. I am a woman employee at a WBE certified business and the current owners are looking to retire. With a full ownership change, would we simply be able to recertify or would the business lose its certification and then I have to submit a new application? So this is not an uncommon scenario. We do have businesses essentially that undergo any type of changes that are recertifications. That being said, any renewal with major changes, especially an ownership change, with our renewals, the process being typically if there are no changes and we are just renewing the application, those undergo kind of what we call a block vote and then are renewed annually. If for any reason there's been changes that need to be reviewed that would come into question with those 5 criteria to still be eligible for the certification, those are treated like a new application where we go back and review those changes to make sure it still meets criteria. So yes, you could still apply. You'd still want to submit all of those documents indicating the changes. So it's not so much that they would lose the certification, but if the previous owners are looking to retire and sell the business, if the new owners did not previously acquire any ownership in the business, so say it was a 5% ownership currently while these current owners are in existence, and then they retired and decided to sell the rest of the business to you, that would maintain a recertification status. If you have no ownership in the business and then are looking to take over, then you would need to start a new application altogether. Okay, and then to reiterate, correct, the fee, it is not free to apply for the certification. That's correct. That's based on your federal tax income with those ranges. Okay, and then is there a list of federal set-aside contracts in areas where there is a deficit? So again, that's going to be within the Small Business Administration or sam.gov system. You do have to be registered to access that portal, and that's going to be unique to each industry. But you likely are going to need to be required to be registered as a WOSB to access those opportunities to see where they require more women-owned business contractors. Okay, we are asked to submit contracts and service agreements. We have a high quantity, 50 plus, so I've chosen 15. So while it does seem tedious and monotonous, we do want all of those contracts and service agreements just to understand the language between those and to make sure that control and operations are still under the ownership and governance of the female owner. So in that case, while that's great that you did set aside the 15, we do want to see all of those, and you are welcome to, if they're electronic, we just recommend saving those as PDFs and uploading them. And then if you do have to scan them, that is okay too, but we do want to see all 50 of those included. Okay. All right, and then WOSB certification criteria. So we did touch on this briefly. What is considered small? So it must be small in primary industry in accordance to the Small Business Association size standards. So again, that's either going to be based on revenue with those business codes, or it's going to be based on the number of employees. You still need to be at least 51% unconditionally and directly owned and controlled by one or more women who are still US citizens. You do still need to manage and oversee the daily operations that are controlled by one or more women owners. Women owners must make long-term decisions for the business. And then this is explicit for corporations only. So women must make up a majority of the board of directors or have a majority of the board votes through weighted voting. And then additionally, women also must make up 51% of the voting power, sit on the board of directors, and have enough voting power to overcome any supermajority requirements. So pay attention to those governing docs, especially if you are a corporation. And then a recent mandate that came into play within we're coming up on a year now from the Small Business Administration. So all corporations, regardless of if you are renewing for your WOSB or are a new applicant are required to submit stock certificates and a corresponding stock ledger to include with your WOSB submission. If you do have questions about what these look like, you can contact your local RPO certification officer. I always have samples that I'm happy to share. There are, I believe, templates that are pretty straightforward to use for stock certificates. And then a stock ledger is easy to draft up in Excel. So those are pretty easy, pretty straightforward. But if you do want to see what those examples look like, reach out to your regional partner organization's certification officer, and they can go ahead and show you and email you some samples of what those look like. Okay, and then WOSB applications. So what is required of you? So you must have proof of an active registration on beta.sam.gov. And once you are active, there is an entity overview page that will prove that you are showing an active status. So the recommendation being that if you are a new time or first time applicant starting in the SAM.gov system, patience is key. Sometimes because it's a government entity that oversees the page, it can take a little bit of time. Even if you have started the process, it can still be at least a week, if not more, before you have that necessary active status. Unfortunately, even if you have started the process, we are unable to start processing the WOSB until we see proof of you being active in the system. So keep that in mind. One of the following is going to be required as well in order to verify the size standards for employees. So one of these is going to be mandated. So the first page of your IRS form or your 941s, we do need all 4 of the previous quarters. If you don't have the 941s, then we'll require a W-3 from the previous year. And then the final option, only if the 2 items do not apply and you don't have either of these, would be a current list of employees. Okay, and then just some tips to remember when you're going through the process. Know beforehand. The more you know the standards and procedures before you apply, the smoother this will go. Second, gather first. So just as you would treating this as an important job application or college application, gather everything that you need electronically or physically first, and then sit down to complete the process. Much smoother to have everything in one place and answer the questions than to start the application and then need to go searching for bits and pieces that you don't have in front of you. Setting realistic expectations. So again, reminding yourself that certification does not get you business. However, it does create some visibility. There are over 80% of national corporations that have programs that are designed to engage diverse suppliers like yourself. It is a lot more than ownership. So while something can say upfront that it is female owned, ultimately we're looking at that operation, governance, and control. So know that it is about a lot more than just ownership. Read it, and then read it again. So this being crucial with governing documents. Know what your organizational documents are and make sure you read them. So that's anything from operating agreements to bylaws to trusts, power of attorneys. A lot of these are the main reasons that applicants are denied is because they don't read the language. They don't necessarily understand what the implications are and how that can be conflicting with our criteria. Right, and then knowing your NAICS codes. So the NAICS acronym is the North American Industry Classification System. It's a 6-digit code that tells a corporation essentially what you do. So you can visit NAICS.com. That'll give you a little bit more information, or your local kind of procurement technical assistance center that can help you select the most appropriate NAICS codes if you look to apply for the WOSB. And then make sure with timely responses. So if you are starting the process, if you do see any outstanding Q&As in your portal or see that someone is trying to reach out to you, make sure that you're responding in a timely manner. The whole process can be held up if we don't get what we need in a timely fashion, and we are unable to proceed unless we obtain what is requested. So make sure you're checking your Q&As, make sure you're listening for any phone calls. Oops, excuse me. And then, oh, sorry guys. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. All right, there we go. Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened. You click the wrong spot and everything just falls apart. Okay, there we go. So timely responses, making sure that if you do have any email requirements, anyone trying to reach out to you, that you are checking those to go ahead and communicate with that officer, that certification officer, to get them what they need so that we can proceed with your application. All right, hold on a second. I've got another question. Now, is it a fee to go get certified by WBD? So yes, the question still stands for WBE. Yes, those are annual fees for renewals, and there are fees every time you apply. So for new applicants, again, based on revenue, there's a range from under $1 million all the way up to 50 million. So 350 is the lowest cost associated with the application, up to 1,250. The WOSB is included if you elect to apply for the WOSB at the same time. That is not a separate fee. Okay. All right. Sorry about that, guys. And then next steps. So just a couple steps if you want a checklist in terms of what to do next. So making sure you review the criteria for eligibility and asking yourself, are you a good fit for this certification? And is it a good fit right now? Sometimes maybe it's not set up. If it's a brand new business, maybe a year or two down the road, it's a better fit. It makes more sense. Know that this is still an option. Long term, we have sometimes applicants that start soon don't necessarily see a benefit because they're still so new and don't have themselves established in the market quite yet and know what they want from the certification. Registering on beta.sam.gov if you are considering any federal contract opportunities and applying for your WOSB. And then if you do have very specific questions that haven't been addressed, contacting your local WBDC office or RPO to get those addressed. Gathering documentation, so making sure you gather all your documents electronically and label them down to the T. I recommend creating folders online, sorting out everything that you need and making sure those are reviewed so that you've read through and understand them. Okay. And then visiting WeBank link and doing a company lookup. So if you are unsure if you're in the system, visit WeBank link and look up your information by company name and tax ID before you create a new account, especially if you have previously applied and it's been a couple years. Even if you think it might be inactive, it's still likely it's in the system. Completing the application in full, making sure that all questions are answered, all of those mandatory documents are updated. Paying your application fee. So pay your application fee and click submit. Again, fastest by credit card. Know that we can't process these applications if paid by check and we don't receive them in the office as soon as possible. We can't touch those until they are in the Chicago headquarters. And then once you do submit those, make sure you're checking WeBank link weekly for those Q&A emails or inquiries in case we have extra questions or need additional documentation. Knowing that you can respond to those questions all at one time does keep the application process moving forward. So making sure that you do address those if you see them, but if you do have multiple questions that you haven't had the chance to respond to at once, addressing those all at once will keep the process moving in a much more efficient way. And then knowing that when the time comes to schedule your site visit, contacting them as soon as they've reached out. Currently, they are still being done virtually well into the foreseeable future. And then knowing that patience is a virtue with this process. So waiting for final approval, the entire process can take anywhere from 30 to 120 days from the time you hit submit until the time you do receive that final decision. So making sure that you are patient and waiting for a response, knowing that at any given time, our certification officers have anywhere from 30 to 50 files on their dashboards. Know that they are working on it and trust that they are. If you do have inquiries about if anything is outstanding or needed, you're welcome to reach out, but know that asking and inquiring about the status every other day is likely not going to accelerate the process. Okay, and then it looks like I have a couple questions. So just to clarify, can you apply for the WBE if the office is in your home? So yes, absolutely. The only difference or caveat here would be for site visits, because we conduct these virtually. Previously, when we were doing these in person, for those that have a home-based office, typically what we don't want to do is have to go to an applicant's home space to conduct that. Being that these are all conducted virtually, that's no longer a standing issue. So all it would mean is that instead of being on camera and kind of giving us a tour of the facility or kind of office-based location, we would just conduct this visit as usual. So yeah, that does not hinder your eligibility at all. All right, so then touching on the recertification process quickly. So the recertification process is required annually to maintain that. You can begin the process up to 120 days prior. Note that site visits are conducted every 3 years and that there are going to be documents that are required. So from the beginning, knowing that it is required to maintain your certification annually to be reviewed. And then 120 days prior to the expiration date is what we advise to make sure that there is no lapsing in your certification. Please note that you don't get additional days on the back end if you apply and are recertified early. We don't add any additional kind of credits to that. It just verifies that there's no lapsing in your certification and it's still issued from 1 year from the date it was renewed. There's not an extension where it's a year and 6 months. Know that it is your responsibility to maintain that current certification. So renewals of certifications cannot be expedited and will not be expedited due to an applicant's delayed timing and reapplying. So again, because the process can take up to 120 days, not guaranteed to, but can. That's why we recommend counting back 120 days from the expiration date so that you can give yourself time to buffer that out. We'd hate to see something lost if it's a vendor opportunity or a meeting based on a certification that's lapsed. But again, it is on the applicant to stay on top of maintaining your certification. And then site visits being conducted every 3 years. Be flexible and make sure you prioritize it once someone contacts you. So again, the sooner you are available and the more availability you give them, the faster they are able to send that Zoom invitation and conduct that site visit the way they need to. Know that communication is automated, so it's sent to the email address that we have on file in WeBank link. So it may go to your spam. Make sure, again, you're checking your spam and trash filters if that tends to be a problem, and that is where the communications are rerouted. Always do use the WeBank link portal for status questions. Again, if you have questions, concerns about where your application is sitting, make sure you go through WeBank link in that Q&A function. It's always encrypted. And then if you're having any IT difficulties, contact IT support. Make sure you're submitting those support tickets in case there are any technical issues. WeBank can be fickle at times, but we want to make sure that you're reaching out to IT support so that they can address the issue and make sure that's resolved for the next applicant. And then be mindful of WeBank guidelines, knowing that if there are any changes, as previously mentioned, if that's ownership structure, bylaws, anything along those lines, that may change your eligibility based on those changes made. So make sure you read through those WeBank guidelines and understand the implications when you do make changes. Don't change your federal tax ID number. You're going to need that for your most recent taxes. And there will be a link to this of recertification documents that you'll need based kind of on your business structure when you reapply. So wrap this up here. So thank you again for everyone that chose to join us this afternoon on the webinar, What to Know Before You Apply. So here is our contact information. This is going to be the number 4 headquarters in Chicago, Illinois. And then we do have our certification specialists in those satellite offices. So Milwaukee is the contact information for Jesse Leonard. And then in our St. Louis office is Jacinta Witherspoon. Again, my name is Jasmine Brower. I am in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis office here. That is our office line. And then that is my email address below. Reminder for all of those who are registered that you will receive an email in the next 24 to 48 hours that's going to include the handout with the pertinent notes and the PowerPoint overview, and then the hyperlinks that have been referenced, a list of all the required documents, and then a link to this recording. So know that that's coming. Give it about 24 to 48 hours, and I will make sure to follow up with those documents. All right, and then if there are any outstanding questions that I didn't have the chance to answer, now would be the best time. But I think we're doing pretty good. A little bit over time, but that's okay. And yes, absolutely, I'm happy to hear that this is very informative. Happy to host these. I know it's a lot of information, but we want to make sure that it's approachable and that you know that there are resources to help guide you through the process. So you're very welcome. Are there any outstanding questions that I didn't get to before I let you guys go? Great. You're welcome. All right. Well, if you do have any outstanding questions, my email address is listed on this final page. If you'd like to write that down, I'll leave it up for about another minute or two, and then I will let you guys go and follow up within the next 48 hours with those promised documents. All right. Oh, thank you guys. I appreciate it. I'm happy that you were able to learn a little bit more, hopefully, about the process and have a lot to take away from it. But yes, otherwise, keep an eye out on your inbox for those documents as promised. And then again, my name is Jasmine Brower, email address in that last slide, and then the office line as well. So thank you all so much for joining me. I hope to see a couple more influxes in applications, but know that there are resources in place to help you and make this process go smoothly. So again, thank you so much for joining me today. If you do have any questions, you know how to reach me. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and a great weekend. I will be sending that list of documents out. And if there are any outstanding questions, then you can absolutely follow up and reach out to me. But thank you all so much. Take care. And I hopefully will look forward to seeing a couple new names in our queue for our applicants. Take care. Thank you.